Welcome, beautiful souls, to a story of a love that claims and a power that sings in the dark. This is a story of a blind girl who fled her cruel family and accidentally entered the Alpha King's carriage, becoming the woman no one expected. Imagine a girl, blind and called worthless, who runs for her life one stormy night. She climbs into a stranger's carriage for shelter and finds herself in the hands of a king, a wolf king. His growl is the last thing she hears before his deep voice rumbles one word that will change everything: mine. If you're ready for a love story where the greatest weakness becomes the strongest magic, make sure you're subscribed with the bell on, because once this tale has you, it won't let go. Let's begin. Episode 1, The Girl in the Dark. The world was what she could touch. Cold, wet stone, rough walls. Isolde's fingers walked the same path they did every day. The room was always damp, drip. Water fell in the corner, scratch. The rat was back. It was not afraid of her. She found the chamber pot by smell. She knew her room by sound and feel. The scrape of her shoes told her where she was. The whistle of wind under the door told her about the world outside. Tonight, that world was loud. Sounds came up through the floor. Plates clattering, men laughing. Her sister Celia's high, fake giggle. A feast. Smells came down, too. Roast meat, fresh bread. Her stomach hurt. Her food was a piece of old bread pushed under the door, if she was lucky. She listened, her father's low voice, her mother's sharp one. Strangers. They talked about money, about land, about deals. Then different footsteps, quick, light ones on the stairs. They stopped at her door. A key turned. The door opened a crack. Someone slipped in. Alara, the kitchen girl. She smelled of cold air and dough. "Miss Isolde, you there?" "I am always here," Isolde whispered. A small, rough hand pressed something into hers. A warm meat pie, wrapped in cloth. "Eat fast," Alara breathed, her voice scared. "The guests, they're from the far north. Bad people. Their flag has a frozen tear on it." Isolde held the pie. "Why are they here?" Alara hesitated. "They talk about strength, about cutting away weak things to make deals stronger." Her voice got very quiet. "Your father, he called it handling burdens." She looked right at the stairs when she said it. Isolde's hands went cold. Burdens. That word was her life. It was this room. It was the silence. It was the missed meals. It was what her father called her the day they knew she would never see. Alara pulled away. "I have to go." The door shut. The lock clicked. The party sounds from below got louder. Isolde stood in the dark, not feeling the pie's warmth anymore. The rat moved. The water dripped. Her heart beat too fast. Handle burdens? She knew. She moved to the door and pressed her ear to the wood. She listened hard, past the noise, for one voice. Her father's voice, close now in the hall below. Clear and cold. "It is done. The price is good for a problem like her. We get rid of the defect tomorrow." A pause. Her mother's voice smooth and agreeing. "At sunrise, then. It is a kindness." Their footsteps walked away. Isolde did not move. She did not breathe. Get rid of the defect. Tomorrow. The last sound she heard was her own heart, pounding in her ears as her dark world ended and something much more terrible began. Episode 2, The Cage of Flesh and Bones. The lock clicked open just before dawn. Isolde hadn't slept. She sat on her pallet, the words "get rid of the defect" spinning in the dark behind her eyes. The door swung wide, not just the maid. 2 sets of heavy footsteps. Rough hands grabbed her arms and pulled her up. No words, they dragged her down the cold corridor. Their grip was like iron, biting into the soft flesh of her upper arms. She knew the way to the scullery by heart, the turn by the uneven flagstone, the smell of wet ash and lye soap growing stronger. There was no fire in the hearth here, only a bucket of water, so cold it smoked in the chill air. The hands pushed her forward. A coarse sponge scraped over her skin, the icy water shocking the breath from her lungs. It was not a bath. It was a scouring. They washed her like they would a dusty plate before a guest arrives. Then a dry, rough cloth. A dress was yanked over her head. The fabric was stiff and scratchy, smelling of mothballs and neglect. It was her best dress, the one they put her in when strangers came to stare. A new scent arrived, sweet, heavy, like rotting flowers. Perfume. It clogged her throat. "Try not to hum, little mute. Celia." Her sister's voice was close, a honeyed whisper in her ear. Her manicured fingers dug into Isolde's shoulders, turning her. "It unsettles people, you know how father gets." Flash! The memory hit Isolde like a slap. She was small. In the garden. A stable dog, usually wild, had lain down at her feet as she hummed a wandering tune. Her father had seen. His face had gone pale, then red with a strange, seething anger. "Stop that noise!" Flash! Older. A tutor with sour breath and pinching fingers. He'd called her a useless drain. A melody of pure sadness had welled in her chest and slipped out. The man's insults had slowed, then stopped. A heavy thud as he hit the floor, fast asleep. Her mother's scream. The lock on her door for 3 days. Stop that noise. The rule of her life. Celia's hand straightened the ugly dress, a mockery of care. "Let's go, they're waiting." The great hall was a wall of sound and heat. The fire was too big. The smell of last night's feast had soured into grease and old wine. Isolde was pushed forward, her bare feet on the cold stone. The stranger's silence was worse than the noise. She felt their eyes, like fingers. "This is the girl?" A man's voice, dry as old paper. "Yes," her father said, his voice smooth. A selling voice, as discussed. Dry, cold hands took her face. They turned her head left, then right. Thumbs pulled down her lower eyelids. She flinched. "The blindness is complete," the dry voice stated. Another set of hands, just as cold, felt her arms, squeezing the muscle, lifted her hair. Small, weak. The bloodline is pure, though. "The master can work with that. He will find a use." The master, a use. Terror, sharp and alive, coiled in Isolde's throat. It was a living thing fighting to get out. A whimper, a scream, a song. She locked her jaw until it ached. A bag of coins clinked on the table. The sound was final. It was the sound of her life being sold. "We will return for her at moonrise," the dry voice said. "See that she is ready." The rest of the day was a blur of silence in her room. No food came, no water. They were making sure she caused no trouble. She was just a thing to be collected later. Night fell. The fear in her throat had grown. It was a pressure, a vibration. It was the melody from her childhood, the one from the garden, the one that had felled the tutor. But now it was twisted with panic and a crushing despair. It wanted out. She pressed her face into her thin, straw-filled pillow. She tried to swallow the song, but a low, broken hum escaped. A single shaky note of pure sorrow. Crack. The sound was small, sharp, like a nut breaking. Isolde froze. The hum stopped. Slowly, she reached out. Her fingers walked across the familiar stones of the wall beside her pallet. They found the windowsill, and there, under her fingertips, was a new path. A hairline fracture splitting the cold stone. She yanked her hand back as if burned. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She had done that. With a muffled, trapped piece of a song. What would a full song do? What would a scream do? The truth washed over her, colder than the scrubbing water. Escape was not just a wish for freedom anymore. It was a necessity. If she stayed, they would take her to the master. And if the fear and the power inside her ever broke free, she did not know what she would become. But first she had to get out of this room. And the only tool she had was a song she was too terrified to sing. Episode 3, The Whispered Melody. Her fingers flew to the crack in the stone. It was sharp. It was a tool. Her other hand found the only thing in the room that belonged to her. An old book of prayers, its pages soft from touch, the leather cover thin and worn. She pushed the sharp stone edge against the binding and began to saw. Back and forth. The sound was a desperate whisper in the dark. The leather resisted, then gave way with a soft rip. She tore a long, narrow strip free. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A plan formed in the blackness behind her eyes, fragile as a spider's web. She didn't have to wait long. The key scraped in the lock near midnight. Not the heavy turn of the guards, the lighter, quicker sound of Alara. The girl slipped in, her body trembling. She shoved a hard, cold piece of cheese into Isolde's hand. "For your journey," she whispered, the words thick with fear. "You have it?" Isolde breathed. A cold metal key was pressed into her palm. "The guard is drunk at the post. You have maybe minutes." Alara's grip tightened. "But first, you have to pay." Isolde's heart stuttered. "I have nothing. Not coin." Alara's voice was a mix of shame and desperate want. "My head, it pounds all the time. It never stops. Since I was little. I heard them long ago, talking about your noises. How they made things quiet. Just make my head quiet. Just for a moment. Please. A song." The price was a song. Isolde's blood ran cold. To use it was to risk everything. To wake the power that cracked stone. But the key was in her hand. The cheese was in her hand. This was her only chance. Trembling, she wet her lips. She thought of the only safe memory she had. A vague, warm feeling that might have been a mother, and a tune that went with it. A lullaby. She let the hum start low in her chest, a single soft note that wobbled with her fear. Then another. A simple, gentle melody, so quiet it was almost just a breath. Alara let out a shaking sigh. "Oh!" The sound was one of pure relief. Then a soft thud. The girl's body hit the floor, her breathing deep and even. Asleep. Guilt, sharp and sour, rose in Isolde's throat. She had done it again. She had used the cursed, wonderful thing inside her. She shoved the cheese into her dress, clenched the key, and stepped over the sleeping girl. The midnight halls were a different creature. They were alive with echoes she usually never heard, the groan of the old house settling, the skitter of something in the walls. Her bare feet were her eyes, feeling the chill of the flagstones, the grit of dirt. Her hand skimmed the wall, every notch and crack a landmark. She moved by memory, by touch, her heart hammering a warning with every step. But beneath her fear, a new sound began. It wasn't in the hall. It was inside. A low, humming note that pulled at her bones. It was different from her lullaby. This melody was hungry. It was a thread of sound only she could hear, tugging her forward, away from the main gates where the guards were, down a narrow, disused servants' passage. She didn't choose to follow it. Her feet just moved. The melody was the only map she had. It led her to a place where the wall smelled of damp earth and rot. Her hands found broken stone, a gap just wide enough. She squeezed through, thorns catching her dress, scraping her arms. Then she was out. The world exploded. Wind, sharp and cold, slapped her face. Rain, light and icy, needled her skin. The smell was overwhelming. Wet pine, decaying leaves, and something else. Something wild and dangerous that made the hair on her neck stand up. The melody in her head grew louder, more urgent, pulling her away from the estate toward the road. She stumbled, fell, got up. The ground was mud and rock. The hungry song was her only guide now, a siren call in her soul. It crescendoed, a single, clear, high note of here. She stopped. Before her, the world felt different. The wind was blocked. A large, solid shadow loomed, smelling of oil, polished wood, and rain-soaked horse. A carriage. It was utterly silent. No driver, no movement from the horses. They were like statues. It was shelter. It was the only thing in the screaming, wet night that wasn't trying to kill her. With the last of her strength, she felt for the handle, found it, and pulled. The heavy door opened with a groan. The air inside was warm, smelling richly of leather and something dark like aged wine. Old wealth. She collapsed onto a soft velvet seat, her body shaking with cold and shock. The door swung shut behind her, sealing her in quiet, plush darkness. For 2 heartbeats, there was only the sound of her ragged breathing. Then outside, a new sound. Heavy, deliberate footsteps crunching on the wet gravel, coming closer. They stopped right beside the carriage. A hand gripped the outside handle and turned. Episode 4, The Beast and the Breath. The door flew open. A wall of sensation hit Isolde, so violent it stole the air from her lungs. Heat, radiating from a massive body blocking the night. The wild animal scent of musk and winter forest. And cutting through it, the sharp metallic tang of fresh blood. He filled the space. She could hear the threat. The rustle of fine fabric pulled taut over shoulders that seemed too broad for the world. The low, rumbling sound that started in his chest. It wasn't a sound a man should make. It was the promise of teeth and tearing. "What is this?" His voice was a snarl, deep and ragged, scraping against her skin. A hand, huge and searing hot, clamped around her forearm. His touch was not human. It was a brand. It was iron forged in a beast's fire. Every hurt, every cruel grip, every moment of pain from her short, dark life surged up in her throat. A sound escaped. A whimper, small, broken, and utterly pure. The snarl stopped. The growl in his chest cut off as if sliced by a knife. His grip on her arm loosened, not letting go, but changing. The crushing pressure eased. He inhaled sharply, a ragged, desperate sound. Again. The command was rough, hungry. She was too terrified to disobey. She let out another shaky breath, this one catching on a sob. He made a noise then, a deep, shuddering exhalation that sounded like a man breaking the surface after nearly drowning. The sound was full of stunned relief. He pulled her, not roughly, but with an undeniable force, out of the carriage and into the dim, rainy light of a lantern. His other hand came up, his fingers surprisingly careful as they tilted her face. She flinched, waiting for a blow. It didn't come. He was studying her. She could feel the intensity of his gaze on her face, on her sightless eyes. His thumb brushed over the fresh, tender bruise on her wrist, the one left by the emissary's cold fingers. A new growl built in the cavern of his chest. This one was different. It wasn't the chaos of before. It was focused, hotter. It vibrated through the hand that held her, a promise of violence, but not for her. For her. "Jansen!" He barked over his shoulder, his voice now pure, ringing authority. "To the stronghold now, no stops." He moved, lifting her back into the carriage as if she weighed nothing, and climbed in after her. The door slammed. The world lurched as the carriage surged forward. The small space was now filled with his heat, his scent, his overwhelming presence. In the dark, his voice came again, closer. A low, dark vow that curled around her. "Who did this to you?" She shrank back into the velvet, her mind blank with fear. She couldn't know. She couldn't possibly understand that her 2 fearful breaths had just done the impossible. For 10 long years, a storm of pain and rage had lived inside him, a curse that gnawed at his bones and blurred the line between man and monster. No potion, no battle, no witch's charm had ever touched it. But her breath, the soft, terrified sound of her pain, had swept through that storm like a clean wind, and left a silence he had forgotten existed. He had found a stray, broken creature in his carriage, but in her silence, he had found a different kind of mystery. One that smelled like wildflowers and rain, and felt for the first time in a decade, like peace. Episode 5, The Gilded Prison. She woke to softness. It surrounded her, a shock so profound it felt like a dream. Beneath her was not rough straw, but layers of silk and down. Over her was the weight of deep, lush furs. Warmth, real and steady, radiated from a nearby fire. Its crackle was the only sound in a vast, quiet space. The air smelled of clean linen, beeswax, and the faint, wild scent of the man who had brought her here. This was not a cell. This was a cage of gold and shadow. The door opened. His footsteps were unmistakable. Heavy, deliberate, each step claiming the ground. He stood near her, his presence like a pressure change in the room. "You will tell me your name." His voice was not a question. It was a command, low and rough. "Isolde." The word was a whisper. "Who were you running from, Isolde?" The story spilled out in broken pieces. The cold room, the missed meals, the word burden. The emissaries with their cold hands, the sale. She called herself useless, the defect, her voice hollow with a lifetime of being told so. A new sound came from him, not a growl. A sharp, heated exhale through his nose like a bull angered. Her story of worthlessness did not make him pity her. It lit a cold, dark fire in him. "You survived them," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "That is not weakness. That is a will of steel they were too blind to see." He asked more, about her family, the lands, the emissary's crest. His questions were sharp, pulling details from her like splinters. With every answer, she felt him circling something, a truth she couldn't see. A knock at the door. A young guard entered carrying a tray of food. The smells made her dizzy: broth, fresh bread, roasted meat. The guard's steps were careful as he approached. As he set the tray on the table beside her, his fingers accidentally brushed the back of her hand. The air in the room shattered. There was a blur of motion, a roar of fury that was all animal. One moment the guard was by her side, the next he was slammed against the far wall with a sickening thud. He slid down, unhurt but white-faced with terror. Thorn stood between her and the guard, his back a wall of tense muscle to Isolde. His voice, when it came, was deadly calm. It scraped over the room like a blade on stone. "The next man who touches what is mine loses his hand, then his arm, then his life. Do you understand?" A choked whimper from the guard. The door opened and shut as he scrambled out. Slowly, Thorn turned to her. The fury was still in the line of his jaw, in his clenched fists. But as his eyes found her, it melted. It changed into something else, something raw and all-consuming. A stark, possessive obsession that burned hotter than the hearth fire. He closed the distance, kneeling before her chair so his face was level with hers. His hand came up, but he didn't touch her bruised wrist. Instead, his fingers, surprisingly gentle, traced the line of her cheekbone. "You are not useless," he said, each word a vow hammered in iron. "You are mine, and I do not keep worthless things. Mine." The word landed in her soul, heavy and final. It was not the salvation she had dreamed of in her dark room. It was not kindness, it was a claim, absolute and terrifying. It was a new kind of sentence, spoken in a voice that brooked no argument. He rose, his shadow engulfing her. "Eat. Rest. This is your room. This is your place." He left, and the door shut with a soft, definitive click. She was alone, surrounded by unimaginable luxury. The echo of the word mine ringing in the silence. She reached a trembling hand toward the fire, feeling its heat. In the hearth, the flames leaped and danced, not to the wind, but to the frantic, hopeful, and terrified rhythm of the heartbeat pounding in her chest. The door was not locked, but she knew, deep in her bones, that it might as well have been sealed by mountain stone. She had traded one prison for another. This one was gilded, warm, and ruled by a beast who looked at her as if she held the moon in her hands. And she had no idea why. Episode 6, A Note in the Dark. Days blurred in the gilded room. The luxurious silence was a different kind of loud. Isolde learned its patterns, the change in the light's warmth on the floor as the sun moved, the scent of polished wood and fur, the distant, muffled sounds of the stronghold coming alive. She was not taken from the room, but he came. Thorn. His visits were intense, quiet storms. He would sit in a chair across from her, his presence a heavy, warm weight in the air. He asked no more questions about her past. Instead, he simply existed near her, as if her presence alone was a thing he needed to absorb. She could feel his eyes on her, a constant, unsettling pressure. "You are safe here," he stated one evening, his voice cutting the quiet. It wasn't a comfort. It was a law he had written. Safe. The word felt strange. She was not beaten. She was not cold. But the feeling of being owned, of being a possession in a beautiful cage, was a chain she felt with every breath. That chain was tested on the third night. He took her from the room. His hand, large and unyielding, wrapped around hers. "You will dine with me," was all he said. He led her through echoing halls, the air changing, filling with the smell of many people, roasted game, and simmering tension. The great hall of his stronghold was a cavern of noise that hit her like a physical wall, clattering plates, booming voices, the scrape of benches. The room fell into a hush as they entered. She felt the weight of 100 stares, curious, hostile, assessing. He guided her to a high table and sat her beside him. His thumb stroked once, possessively, over the back of her hand before letting go. The message was clear to everyone watching. The meal was a torment. She picked at food she couldn't see, her every sense screaming under the public scrutiny. Then, a new voice cut through the murmur. Deep, challenging, coming from the front of the crowd. "My king." The voice was slick with false respect. "We've heard whispers that you keep a human pet now, that her weakness soothes the ferocity in you. Does the Alpha King now need a crutch?" A deadly silence swallowed the hall. Isolde felt Thorn go rigid beside her. Not with fear, but with a terrifying, rising energy. The air grew thick, charged like before a lightning strike. She heard the faint, sickening sound of bones beginning to crack and reform. "Kale's mongrel cur." Thorn's voice was a low, venomous rumble, no longer fully human. "You dare?" The challenger laughed, a jarring sound. "I dare to see the truth. Let the beast out, king. Let's see if it's still yours to command, or if it's been tamed by a blind mouse." A roar erupted from Thorn, pure, unfiltered rage. The table shuddered. Isolde heard the splinter of wood, the gasps of the pack, the sudden scramble of bodies moving back. The curse was rising, a storm breaking its chains. The beast was winning. And Isolde was back in the dark, listening to violence build, waiting for the pain to come. But this violence, it was for her. Because of her. The challenger's words rang in her ears. Her weakness, a hot, defiant anger, sharp and new, flared in her chest. It wasn't weakness. Her survival wasn't weakness. This man, this beast fighting for control beside her, he had seen that. He had called it a will of steel. The growls turned guttural, savage. The smell of wild magic and aggression filled the air. He was losing himself. And a part of her, a part she didn't understand, couldn't let that happen. It wasn't a thought. It was an instinct deep and maternal. The same instinct that had hummed to calm a scared dog long ago. Her lips parted. A single clear note floated out. Soft, yet it cut through the snarls like a shaft of moonlight through black water. It was the lullaby, the one from the garden, the one that had felled the tutor. The note hung in the air. The savage sounds from Thorn stopped abruptly. The entire hall was a vacuum of silence. She could feel every pair of eyes locked on her, their shock a palpable force. She took a shaky breath and hummed another note, weaving them into the simple, ancient melody. A song of peace, of quiet nights, of safety. She heard a heavy, shuddering sigh, the sound of claws retracting, the crackle of receding magic. Thorn's large, warm hand found hers on the table, his grip tight, almost painful, but his touch was human again. He was back. The silence stretched, thicker now, loaded with awe and dawning fear. Then a low whisper from the crowd. "Siren!" Thorn's thumb moved over her knuckles. A spark, sharp and sweet and hot, jumped from his skin to hers. It wasn't static, it was a connection. A thread of pure, golden feeling pulling taut between their hearts. She gasped. His breath hitched. In the dark behind her eyes, for a fleeting second, she didn't see light. She felt him. A vast, turbulent, possessive ocean of emotion, and at its center, a stunned, blazing core of recognition. Mate. The word bloomed in her mind, not her own, yet hers completely. The challenger was forgotten. The pack was forgotten. There was only the shocking new tether, vibrating with a promise and a power that terrified her even more. And beneath the new bond, the old hungry melody in her blood, the one that had led her to the carriage, awoke once more. It purred in satisfaction. It had brought her here, to him. But now it was changing, weaving itself into the golden thread. It was no longer just a guide. It was becoming a command. Episode 7, The Gold They Threw Away. The bond was not a sound. It was a new layer to the world. In the quiet of her room after the shocking silence of the hall, Isolde sat, feeling it. When Thorn was in his chambers down the hall, the bond was a steady, warm hum, like a stone left in the sun. When he was angry elsewhere in the stronghold, it was a distant, low drumbeat of heat. And when he looked at her, it was a focused, possessive blaze that made her breath catch. She was beginning to map her world through the terrain of his emotions. It was terrifying. It was the most solid ground she had ever stood on. For 2 days they existed in this fragile new peace. He did not speak of the bond. He didn't need to. His presence was constant, a tangible force beside her. He would read reports aloud, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room, as if including her in the rhythm of his rule. She learned the scent of his focus, the feel of his calm. It was a strange, quiet intimacy, woven through with the golden thread that now permanently connected her soul to his. The peace was shattered by iron. A long, low blast from a warning horn tore through the stronghold's morning calm. It was not the sound of a friendly approach. It was a challenge. Isolde felt the bond jolt, Thorn's serene focus evaporating into instant, cold fury. From her window, she could hear the commotion at the main gates below. Raised voices, the clatter of unfamiliar horses, and then a voice that froze the blood in her veins. Her father's voice projecting false authority. "We demand an audience with the Alpha King. He holds our daughter unlawfully." A cage of ice formed around Isolde's heart. They had come. Thorn did not come for her. She felt him move, a storm of contained violence striding toward the battlements. Drawn by a dread she couldn't name, she let her hand trail along the wall, finding her way to the small balcony that overlooked the main courtyard. The wind carried the words up to her. "A delicate, troubled creature," her father, Baron Vane, was saying, his voice a polished tool of lies. "Our blood, our responsibility. Her mind is fragile, her condition difficult. We've come to take our daughter home, where she can be cared for properly. You must understand, it is a family matter." Isolde's fingers turned to ice on the stone railing. Fragile, difficult, cared for. Each word was a brand from her past. A deeper silence followed. She could picture Thorn on the battlement, a statue of lethal power looking down at the pathetic parade below. When his voice came, it wasn't a roar. It was worse. It was a blade wrapped in velvet, so quiet the wind almost stole it, yet it carried to every ear. "You mean," Thorn began, his tone conversational and deadly, "you discovered who was really bidding for her?" A hitch in the air, a collective intake of breath from her father's guards. "Carl of the Shadow Fen," Thorn continued, the name dropping like a poisoned stone. He promised you more than just gold, didn't he, Baron? A minor lord on a worthless rocky plot. He promised you a place at his table. Protection, power, all for the price of a burden you couldn't wait to be rid of. That is a lie! Her sister Celia's shrill voice started. I can smell the lie on you. Thorn cut her off, his voice gaining a fraction of heat, the beast whispering behind his words. I can hear your father's heart racing like a rabbit's. You made a deal with a devil to sell your own flesh, and now the devil has lost his prize, to me. And you have lost your key to his favor. He leaned forward, the motion felt by everyone. So now you come crawling back, not for your daughter, for your investment. You look at the gold you threw away and see it shining in my hall, and it makes you sick. The truth, laid bare by a stranger, was more violent than any blow. It's now clear to Isolde that the same Kale was the master who wanted to buy her. Also the same Kale was the one that caused commotion at the dining hall the last time. Isolde swayed, the stone under her hands the only real thing. He saw it. He saw them. The beautiful gilded cage she was in had a door that faced a truth so brutal it cut her free from a lifetime of twisted words. You have no claim here, Thorn's final verdict rang out, absolute and cold as winter iron. Turn your wagons around. The next time you approach my borders, I will view it as an act of war, and I will paint the stones of your pathetic keep with the truth of your blood. Below, sputtered protests were drowned by the sudden unified growl of Thorn's pack, a sound that shook the very foundations of the gate. Isolde stepped back from the balcony, the echoes of her father's exposed greed and Thorn's ruthless defense warring inside her. The bond thrummed with protective fury. He had fought for her, not with claws, but with truth. But as she stood in the silent, luxurious room, a new, chilling realization dawned. Her family's greed had just painted a target on Thorn's back for the real enemy. Kale knew she was here, and he wanted his prize back. Episode 8, The Worth of a Song. The great hall doors groaned open to a different kind of storm. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of fear, of travel, of her father's cheap, sharp perfume. Thorn's hand was a firm, unmovable pressure on the small of Isolde's back, guiding her forward. He had not asked. He had simply stated, "You will hear the worth your family places on you now." His voice was a low growl in her ear, the bond between them thrumming with a possessive, protective fury that felt like a suit of armor. They were not seated at the high table. They stood in the center of the cavernous space, the pack a silent, watchful circle in the shadows. Her father, Baron Vane, her sister Celia, and 2 guards were forced to stand before them, exposed. Well? Thorn's single word echoed. You traveled so far for an audience. Speak your piece, then get out. Her father cleared his throat, the sound wet and nervous. The polished lies from the battlement were gone, stripped away by the raw truth Thorn had exposed. Isolde could hear the shift in his breathing, the rustle of his fine coat as he turned not to Thorn, but to her. Isolde, my child. The words so false, so alien landed like stones. Your sister, he continued, his voice softening into a painful mimicry of concern. Celia. She hasn't been well. Her nerves. They're in shreds since you left. You remember, don't you? How your humming used to calm her fits. Just a little tune and she'd be right as rain. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper that carried in the silent hall. We need you to come home, just for a little while, to help your sister. She's family. A soft, theatrical gasp. Celia let out a shaky, fragile breath. Please, Issy, she whimpered, the childhood nickname a weapon. My head, it's splitting. Only you can make it quiet. The manipulation was a thick, suffocating smoke. It was the same logic that had locked her away. Your only value is what you can do for us. Isolde stood perfectly still. The cold, hungry girl in the dark room would have crumpled. Would have felt the guilty pull, the desperate need to be useful, to earn a crumb of belonging. But she was not that girl anymore. She felt the solid, furious presence of Thorn at her back. Not just a man, but a force of nature. Through the bond, she didn't sense doubt. She felt a wall of unwavering, ferocious belief. He saw her not as a tool, but as his. The contrast was so stark it burned away the last of her confusion. She thought of Alara, the servant girl she'd accidentally sung to sleep. A power she'd been taught to fear and hide. Her family hadn't locked it away because it was evil. They'd locked it away because they couldn't control it, and they feared anything they couldn't count like coins. A strange calm settled over her. The hum in her blood, the one that had led her here, went silent and watchful. She spoke, and her voice did not tremble. It was clear, carrying, and it rang with a finality that shocked the very air. "You never called me child. You called me the defect." The word, spoken aloud in her own voice, lost its power. It became just a sad, small thing. "You locked away the song you now need because you were too small-minded to fear anything but a loss of coin." She turned her blind eyes toward the sound of Celia's ragged breathing. "I will not sing for her. Let her nerves shatter. They are built on my silence." For a heartbeat, there was utter stillness. Then a raw, guttural sound of pure rage. "You ungrateful wretch." Her father's voice shattered, all pretense gone, revealing the rotten core beneath. "You vile, useless creature! We should have drowned you at birth and saved the world your misery." The moment the last vile word left his mouth, Thorn moved. It wasn't the blur of speed from before. It was a single, devastating step. The sound was a brutal, meaty thud of fist-meeting flesh, followed instantly by the heavy, limp crash of a body hitting the stone floor. The hall was frozen. Thorn's voice, when it came, was colder than the deepest winter, quieter than a grave, and it promised an eternity of violence. "The next word," he said, each syllable a shard of ice, "any of you speak, will be your last." He let the absolute silence hang, a noose around every throat in the room. "Get out of my kingdom." Episode 9, The Fae's Whisper. The silence after the doors slammed shut was a living thing. It pulsed with the echo of violence and the shocking absence of her father's voice. Isolde stood in the center of the great hall, her entire body trembling. But it wasn't the cold, shrinking fear of the dark room. This was a seismic shaking, as if every chain she'd ever worn was rattling itself to pieces all at once. She had spoken, she had refused, she had called them small-minded, and the world had not ended. Strong arms closed around her from behind, pulling her against a chest that was all hard muscle and simmering heat. Thorn. His rage was not gone. She could feel it in the tense cords of his arms, in the rapid, heavy beat of his heart against her back. But it was a rage that encircled her, a fury that burned for her, not at her. It hummed through the bond, a protective, possessive storm that felt, strangely, like the only safe harbor in the world. "They will never touch you again," he vowed into her hair, his voice low and gravelly, each word a king's decree etched in blood and iron. "They are ghosts, they are less than dust." She believed him. In that moment, with the taste of her own defiance still sharp on her tongue, she believed him completely. A weight she had carried since birth crumbled into nothing. She was not a defect, she was his. And in his world, that meant she was untouchable. The victory was a heady, terrifying whine. It made her feel strong. It made her feel open. For the first time, she wondered about the power that lived in her throat. Not with family-taught shame, but with a flicker of curiosity. What was it, if it wasn't a curse? It was in this unguarded, yearning state that he found her. She was in the castle gardens later that day, Thorn a brooding, watchful presence several paces away, dealing with a beta. The air was sweet with late-blooming herbs. A new scent arrived, not of earth or wolf, but of frost-kissed lilies and cold starlight. The footsteps on the gravel path were light, precise. my lady?" The voice was like nothing she'd ever heard. Musical, gentle, each syllable perfectly formed. It held a reverence that made her skin prickle. "I am Lior," the voice said, maintaining a respectful distance. She could feel Thorn's immediate, wary focus snap toward them. "An emissary from the Silverwood Court. May I approach?" At Thorn's grunt of tense permission, the scent of winter flowers came closer. "I witnessed what transpired in the hall," Lior said, his tone brimming with what sounded like genuine awe. "To speak truth to one's tormentors. It is the mark of a royal spirit. But then, that is your birthright, is it not?" Isolde turned her head toward the voice, confused. "Your song," Lior breathed, the word full of wonder. "It is not a defect, my lady. It is a lineage. A noble, ancient lineage that my people have long thought faded from this world. You are a daughter of the Siren. Your voice is not a tool. It is a birthright, a gift of truth and command that kings of old would have gone to war to hear." Every word was a balm. They washed over the raw, bruised places where her family's words had festered. Noble, birthright, gift. He spoke of her power not as something useful, but as something sacred. He was the absolute antithesis of everything she had known. I don't understand it," she whispered. The confession pulled from her by his kind, authoritative tone. "Understanding takes time," Lior said sympathetically, "and focus. The mind's eye must be clear to see the soul's power." There was a soft, metallic whisper, then a cooler presence hovered near her hand. "This is a moonstone, from the heart of our oldest forest. For those with inner sight, it can act as a lens, a focus. It might help you see what you are. To understand the song within." He placed the smooth, cool stone in her palm. It was soothing. It felt like honesty, like the kindness she had been starved for. Wounded by her family's venom and buoyed by Thorn's fierce, possessive love, her defenses were down. She was vulnerable to this perfect, beautiful empathy. Her fingers curled around the stone. A vision sharp and brutal as a knife stabbed behind her eyes. Not light, but a sense of place, endless, echoing cold. Walls of blue-black ice, the smell of pine needles and deep perpetual frost. And in the center of it all, a throne of twisted, frozen roots. And on it, a shadow with eyes that glinted like distant, hostile stars. Kale. She gasped, wrenching her hand back as if burned. The moonstone clattered to the gravel. A moment of stunned silence. Then a soft, satisfied sound from Lior. The gentle empathy was gone from his voice, replaced by a chilling, analytical pleasure. "Ah," he murmured, the word a blade of ice. "The connection is stronger than I hoped." The garden, the sun, Thorn's nearby presence, all of it fell away, replaced by a deeper, more cunning cold. Her family's greed had opened the door to her heart, and the Fae's beautiful deception had just slithered right through. Episode 10. The Web of Frost. The scent of winter lilies still hangs in the air, now smelling of deceit. Isolde stumbles back, her hand burning where the moonstone had touched her. Thorn is across the garden in an instant, his body a solid wall between her and the Fae emissary. The bond floods with a protective fury so intense it steals her breath. "What did you do?" Thorn's voice is deathly quiet, all civility gone. Lior doesn't flee. He smiles, a chilling, elegant gesture. "I merely confirmed a hypothesis, Alpha King. The connection between the Siren and the source of your curse is remarkably potent. My master will be most interested." "Your master?" Thorn breathes the words, understanding dawning. "Kale sent you, not to treat, to scout." "To admire," Lior corrects, his eyes gliding to Isolde with a covetousness that feels dirtier than her father's greed. "And to plant a seed. The moonstone is not just a focus, little Siren. It is a whisper. And now, it has whispered your location, your essence, to the one who has been searching for you. Thorn moves, but Lior is fey. He doesn't run. He simply fades, like mist in sunlight, his final words hanging in the air. He is coming for what is his by right of blood and magic. You are just the temporary keeper. The garden is empty. The stone lies on the path, inert and ominous. The stronghold erupts into controlled chaos. Thorn's rage is a silent, terrifying command. Guards are dispatched. The borders are sealed. Isolde is taken not to her luxurious room, but to the deepest, most secure chamber in the fortress, Thorn's own private quarters. The walls are sheer stone. The door is reinforced iron. It is the safest place in the kingdom. And it feels like her final coffin. For 2 days, Thorn is a storm contained. He paces, he barks orders, he holds her with a desperation that borders on pain. The bond is a live wire of his fear and fury. He blames himself. I let him near you, he growls into the dark, his face buried in her hair. Isolde, however, is not trembling. The shock has hardened into a cold, clear resolve. She thinks of the vision, Kale's frozen throne. She thinks of the seed Lior planted. Her power is not just a song, it is a beacon. And she has been lit. On the 3rd night, she speaks into the tense silence. He will find a way in. The stone. It's a link. I can still feel it. A cold thread in my mind. Thorn goes still. Can you break it?